welcome to Lady Audaci-Tea. It's Alex.
And Amanda.
And we are here post Endgame being released. And It's obviously, as I'm sure you've heard, been a bit of a show.
We've had a week, needless to say.
It's been a week. So to just start us off, because we're going to get into banana articles and this is directly related, a Dutch version of Endgame actually said the names of the royals who allegedly showed concern about Archie's skin tone.
Right.
Now, we do not clearly know how.
Yeah, I have some thoughts, but it's still the waters are very muddy here. Like, it's still very unclear how this even happened. And like calling it a translation error is not the most accurate wording.
It's not actually, yeah, because the translation, the people who translated it from the English to Dutch have made it very, very clear that they translated exactly what was on paper, and those names were on paper. Because as someone pointed out, like translation, the whole point is that you're able to do it correctly, and you don't just, take artistic, freedom with things. So it's kind of a lot to put it on these ladies when they did nothing wrong. Personally, I think maybe names were named in a previous copy. Yeah. And they went through the legal of it all and was like, actually, we can't do that because Omen has made it very clear the reason they were not named in the US and UK versions is because he wrote this in the UK and he had to follow UK laws, which means the names cannot be named. Yeah. So I think. Mm-hmm.
And he said that he's said multiple times, and by the time this episode airs, who knows where this conversation will be. But as of now, he's saying that the version he signed off on had no names in it. He says he's never submitted a draft that had names in it. And from there, things get so interesting because somehow this Dutch translator thought that the names thought that the names were supposed to be part of their draft. So I don't know who screwed the pooch on this one, but it sounds like somebody involved with passing a manuscript to a translator fucked up.
Yes, majorly, and decided to pass on the wrong transcript, not the one that was signed off on. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And in that, obviously, the names that were named was Charles and Kate. I think Charles was a little less shocking. Kate was very shocking for some people because I think a lot of people had their bets on Camila because she is someone who's been overheard talking about, I hate woke culture.
And all the times that the royal family has been defended by people like Prince William, you would think Kate would be a shoo-in, a great person to have out there, like speaking on this, even gently, Yes. But as the person that so many people tune in to see, if you're looking to denounce racism, hello, bring Kate in. But
and we've always wondered why they haven't. Okay. And maybe we partially have our answer why, because in the specific Dutch translation, it says pretty much that once Meghan found out about these conversations and who were involved, that's when Kate and Meghan stopped talking directly, which was in 2019. And I think we've always kind of wondered why Recollections May Vary was attached to her. And why there seemed to just be a coldness. Okay.
Right. But Alex, the question we need to be asking is why has Meghan never taken to Kate? That's the real question here.
Look who's doing it now. Yes. Okay. Speaking of, so our Bananas article and the banana woman of always, Camila Tomney, wrote 2 articles for the Telegraph, one on the 3rd and one on the 4th. And it just so happens that both headlines blame the Sussex and or Meghan. And the one we will be going over is, why has Meghan never really taken to Kate? Question mark. And then the subtitle, which I think is very, very important because it is the crux of the entire narrative for the UK British press and for the royal since this has dropped, has been, it's worse to be named racist than to be a racist. Absolutely. And the subtitle absolutely says, the Princess of Wales has been named by the BBC in a racism row, deepening the rift between the royal wives. I'm just saying. And I should note now, in a lot of the opinions you at least will be hearing from me, it is from the fact that not one person has denied they said it. Through the briefing, through an official statement, but especially through the briefing, no one has denied it. Rebecca English actually said through all of her asking, not once has anyone denied that the names that were named were not accurate. I'm just saying.
And that's very interesting because in the past, there have been, I can think of 2 outright instances of the palace saying it was not, definitively was not Charles. There was an article, I think it was for Prince William's 40th birthday, if I'm remembering correctly, where the person writing it said, I've been told who the names were, like who the person was who expressed concerns, and it wasn't Charles. And at that time, I took that to mean, okay, it's William, because if it's also not William and this article is about William, say it's not William. But so that just, it makes things more confusing. And the last time that Charles got named, I think it was in another royal courtier book, basically.
Yes.
The palace straight up came out and said, this is fiction. This is not true. So I'm intrigued at what their response will be this time. I think they're taking it slow. And like Omid writes in the book about how they're not very quick to react to things like this. But
and Charles, in his reaction so far, what I have noticed is he has not directly attacked Meghan or Harry. They're throwing out, maybe we'll do something legally, which personally I don't believe they will, because even if the onus of responsibility is on Omid, I personally think Omid would throw whoever he needed to under the bus to prove that he was told this. Yeah. So, like, I'm a journalist, I'm being put on stand, I'm going to be honest about where I got this information. And I don't think that Charles or the royal family want to risk people having to go on the stand for this.
For sure.
And just on top of that, it's very contrast to what we're seeing from Kate's team. Because, yes, I do think Meghan has briefed since this has all happened. And I think it was to Victoria Ward for a December 2nd article for The Telegraph. Because, yes, I think they sometimes brief to Victoria Ward because she is one of the few royal rota journalists that didn't get the pick on Meghan, okay? She just kind of tells you what her sources are telling you. And in it says a source close to Meghan says her team never gave Omid the letter, or no one from her team has even spoken to him about this book at all. Right. And that has been carried on in other UK press when talking about this. Right. So that happened December 2nd. And then suddenly Camilla Tominey was out. 2 articles in 2 days going in on Meghan, obviously being briefed, I think, by Kensington Palace.
It's just so crazy to me, too, because Harry and Meghan have literally nothing to do with this book, and they've been it's been turned into an opportunity to just bash them once again. And the British press lives for this. It's so clear. But yeah,
they're actually getting the money they missed from Meghan being gone right now. They're seeing those clips once again. And
this happens like twice a year for them. It's sad that in the past 2 years it's happened right before Kate's Carol concert. But the Tominey subtitle here, the Princess of Wales being named, has deepened the rift between the royal wives.
Yes.
I feel like the royal wives, like that rift is already well established.
Okay, and it's packed up, bow tie, everything. Like we get it.
It's the actions that happened years ago at this point that made that happen, not the fact that the public is now finding out about it. I'm sure that both sides wish that this would just stop being newsworthy, because whatever the resolution, I think they've all come to one privately.
Yes.
I think whether that is we're just not talking or we're at peace with it, whatever. I think the royals themselves are not taking any actions. They're not making any moves here. It's literally just a media kerfuffle at this point.
Exactly. And I think for Meghan and Harry, I can imagine too, is they know that we still live in a world where it's worse to be called racist than to be a racist. So this really doesn't do anything for them. They made it clear, they told their story, and they want to move on. And through their actions, they have stuck to that. So I very much think, and this is where I do feel bad for Omid, because everyone thinks like he's all friendly with them, but I don't think he is. So he is out here on his own getting all of this shit piled onto him without being able to call Meghan at night. Like, can you believe these people? Like, it's not the reality of what's going on here. If anything, they're probably pissed at him too right now because they didn't want to have to go through this again. Yeah. But to this article, and you see why they don't want to have to deal with this crap anymore. Because despite the article saying we're going to learn about why Meghan didn't take to Kate, the first 4 or 5 paragraphs is just reasons why Kate did not take to Meghan.
Right.
Like, plain and simple. So the first that we get to is an instant that Kate and William decidedly did not like Meghan. And you guys, we're going back to 2018, the Royal Forum, and I just think it really highlights how Meghan could truly do nothing right. Could you
Yeah.
read this passage for us, Amanda?
Absolutely. So, quote, as Tina Brown later pointed out in her 2022 book, The Palace Papers, Meghan fluently took up the majority of the airtime. Quote, with Blythe proprietorship, she deployed an issue that was not even on the foundation's docket, women's empowerment, then at its fervid height with the acceleration of the Me Too movement, she wrote. Quote, women don't need to find a voice. They have a voice. They need to feel empowered to use it, Meghan quotably exhorted as Harry looked on with awe and his brother and Kate stood by with expressionless irritation. The event was supposed to be about promoting better mental health, and here was the Duchess seemingly politicizing it. How dare she?
How dare she? And truly, too, it's like, yes, this is an event about mental health. It's almost like talking about how women need to be heard.
That's such a quotable moment. That is the single quote from Meghan that I think I see the most. It's on stickers, it's on mugs.
And that's the point of these. That's the point of a summit like this, is to speak your piece, but to get the quotable moment. Yeah, the sound bites. And what really is they're pissed that they didn't get the sound bite. Meghan stole that. She did. And I'm sure she didn't mean to.
I truly do not remember. I don't
her.
remember anything that Will and Kate said during this forum, to be quite honest with you.
Thing. The only notable thing said was William being, when they asked if it's hard to work with family, and William's like, oh, you can't.
And everyone's laughing.
Awkward laughs.
But the rest of it, all I remember about Kate speaking is that it was kind of word salad and the normal nothing burger that we're used to getting from her, because she does play ball with the idea that the royals are supposed to be apolitical. And it is a fundamental difference between the two couples. But thinking that that's a bad thing on Meghan's part, and like, it just frustrates me so much, because we're so willing to adhere to the way things have always been done and not ever admit that something needs to change. But obviously it's Meghan's fault for being, quote unquote, too political by saying that women have a voice, which is not at all controversial. Well, to the people reading the Telegraph, it might be, but
And I think it's interesting to me too, the fact that they're saying that was political, because I get talking about Me Too movement in a positive way is endorsing it, but all of this was social matters. Like, this wasn't political yet.
Right.
Or, I think even we can say is political now. So,
and they have no problem giving Kate credit for not even supporting the Me Too movement at the the BAFTAs that year,
which was the real reason. Black belt. Yes, a black belt. This is the real reason they were mad, which I can understand if it's true that Meghan would get frustrated that because William and Kate didn't say something that she couldn't. Feminism is something that she is very passionate about. You're talking about mental health. Exposing a bunch of abusers is good for a woman's mental health. So it's truly just like, she could do nothing right. If anything, like, out of the royal forum, I feel like the thing you could tack on to was that she asked Kate to borrow a lip gloss. That's weird. Okay, talking about the Me Too movement is not, because again, I love Meghan, but I'm sorry, boo-boo, why are you asking to borrow someone's lip gloss that wouldn't even come out and greet you when you stop by to say hi? This is not a sorority, ma'am. You need to understand. This is not a
and again, this is reasoning why the royals didn't take to Meghan, not the other way around, which is such shady framing from Camilla. But she's such an unserious person. Can I please read the next section of this article?
Yes, please. Please read the next section.
We're still talking about the Royal Forum. So the Royal Forum, it took place in the end of February 2018. And another reason that Meghan just wasn't up to snuff here, quote, at the time, the beast from the east was sweeping through the UK, leading to freezing temperatures, heavy snow, and heavy winds. This forum takes place inside, by the way. This is an insert from me. We are inside a building, to be clear. Quote, royal aides were therefore surprised to find Meghan had dressed in a summer dress for the summit, as Kate, who was 7 months pregnant with Prince Louis at the time, opted for something rather more conservative. I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember what Meghan wore to this summit, but when I saw the pictures, I laughed out loud, because this is not a summer dress. It's a sleeveless dress. She's showing her arms. How dare she? And
that's the how dare she. And I think what's funny about this is that they may be talking about the little V-neck, because it's like a trouser wrap dress. It's Jason Wu. Kate is now doing that. She is showing more clavicle now than Megan was then, but she has never once been taunted with she's not dressing conservative enough. When she stepped out of that car and showed all that leg, it was exciting. It was not a bad thing. But Megan shows some arms and like a quarter of her clavicle, and it's like she's not dressing appropriate.
Well,
I mean,
her knees
showing her knees.
I was going to say her knees are covered and Kate's aren't. Kate has a little 3/4 boat neck, probably Amelia Wickstead dress on. And, you know, she's got her baby bump and she's got her mom haircut. So she does look much more conservative.
Yes.
But it's this like, it's almost a dog whistle for
dog whistle.
You know, drawing this line between them
or something in the other article. It's been like a dog whistles. It's racing because you guys including in this. One of the ones that we've talked about individually is one of the reasons that Kate did not take to Megan was because she heard that during a shooting weekend when everyone was talking about Trump and the election for 2016, Megan jumped in and was like, no to Trump, and this is why. And she also shut down transphobic jokes and misogynistic jokes. And this got back to Kate and William, and they just did not like that about Megan, which again, I think shows, they just weren't ever going to mesh politically, culture-wise, the whole damn thing. Yeah. Because on top of all of this going on in this article, real quick outside of this, Camila Tomley has been on BBC Live talking about this, and in it, her excuse, she actually says this, you guys, and I will post the video. She says in all her time of being close to people in the palace and being close to people who were a part of these things that we're talking about, never once has she heard a thing about racism. Yes, they were anti-American, which is really great to say about the royals and the people who work for them, that they're anti-American. Okay. Xenophobia is okay. And that they were, and she has seen misogyny because Meghan gets blamed for when Harry should also be blamed for things. And
which I do agree with.
Exactly. And that's what's so sinister about it. I'm going to throw out one thing that's true, and I know we can all agree with, to seem like I'm not some, POS. I could be feminist too. Yeah. But I'm going to then I'm going to say that and then follow it up with, but none of it was racist. She is the white woman. She has no idea what racism is. Yeah. She has no idea what it's like to experience it. And she's saying with her full chest, she experienced misogyny and she experienced xenophobia, but no way did she experience racism. And that's
I get that. Cool. I get that all the time in TikTok comments, in DMs, in people who think that it's a flex to say, I don't hate her because she's Black. I don't hate her because she's mixed race. I hate her because she's American or an actress, which is, hey, we're bringing classism here.
Yes, literally.
All of these things. And it's just, it's not the flex you think it is.
It's not. And I'm sorry, it's not possible to experience those things and not experience some racism too when you're a person of color. Like that people don't just skip over that. They can give you misogyny and anti-Americanism and classism. They don't go, oh, but racism, that's just too far for me. Because no, that's not how it works. So it's really interesting what, again, I think is actually one of KP's mouthpiece are bringing us. It is not saying Kate did not do this. I can't believe anyone would push that narrative. It's, I can't believe someone would say this. Yeah. And the cherry on top of the shit fest is at one point, she really has the audacity to say that she is briefed that people were upset that Meghan would not introduce Doria to William and Kate. Mm-hmm. Mind you, at this point, she went to go meet them, and William stood in the door frame, didn't let them in, and Kate sat in the backyard with her kids and didn't come in to say hi at all. But they're expecting to meet her mother, which I'm sure would have been something they just used against her in the press, saying, hey, we loved your mom. She's the real Black one, because that's what they love to kind of like push Doria in that direction.
Right.
So it reads, around the same time as the forum, Meghan's mother, Doria Ragland, flew to London for her daughter's baptism and other wedding preparations. But curiously, she was never introduced to William and Kate, despite the prince and princess repeatedly asking to meet her. It was all very bizarre, said one source. Meghan seemed to want to put a separation between them. In truth, there had been a degree of frisson almost as soon as Meghan officially arrived on the royal scene in 2016 to a lukewarm reception from formal William and Kate, who, as well as finding her a little full-on, had no idea she would be a keeper, having met a succession of Harry's girlfriends. Yeah.
Why is Kate so protective of Harry? I want to ask.
That will always, because I truly believe that is one of their big things they're angry about and were shocked by, was that Harry actually told Meghan. I really don't think they thought Harry would, go outside the family and tell someone they still thought of as an outsider. It was a very big shock to them how loyal he was to Meghan.
Yeah,
And that
absolutely.
is where I've got to give that man some credit. I
Yeah.
got to give him a little bit of credit there.
He's a wife guy. He was a wife guy from like day one of meeting Meghan.
Yeah, like he was ready. And it's so funny that they just kept, and I think it says again a lot about the classism and the racism that was so predominant with how they thought about Meghan. It was like, oh, no way he can take her seriously. She's just like this hot little light skin thing, jungle fever. He'll get it out of his system and he'll move on. I mean, at one point, it was like the thing was how someone called her like his showgirl, which I've always thought it sounded like such a Philip thing to say, something like that, because we all know his history.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they were never really totally taking her seriously. And last but not least on this, something that's mentioned in one of the two articles is that Meghan complained about the Middletons being able to pretty much cash in on the royal connections, like using a particular like hangar at an airport that's super private. Things
and
like that.
That's another thing that links to Doria too. I found that passage very interesting. I have it here. Wrongly convinced that Kate's family had free use of, it was the Windsor Suite, which is a VIP lounge at Heathrow. It usually costs around £5,000 to access it, but Meghan insisted Doria be able to use it when traveling to the UK, allegedly citing the risk to her safety, which fair, because she was called almost straight out of Compton by the British.
And called her a welfare queen at one point. A Sun article that
there are still people who get in my comments and say she's a drug dealer. I'm like, that's just a lie.
It's horrendous.
But the Tominy's writing that Meghan insisted on this, connecting it to the fact that she thought the Middletons were able to use the suite, which, okay. But she writes, quote, in fact, no one can recall the Middletons using the Windsor suite, although William and Kate do use it whenever they travel through the airport. Doria was spotted there en route to Windsor for Harry and Meghan's wedding. And okay, no one can recall the Middletons using the Windsor suite. Is that maybe because their son-in-law is flying them private places? Is it maybe because they live in the UK?
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing about this is the Telegraph in 2010 was one of the many magazines who were reporting about party pieces exploiting the engagement. Because they announced their engagement and literally less than like 24 hours later, party pieces had wiped all of their Christmas stuff. Or no, that was something separate. I'll get to. They had a new blog post up on their party pieces website that was said, every little girl dreams of being a princess. And there's nothing a princess likes more than throwing a party.
Right.
Okay. So that was a whole thing. And then in 2012, when William and Kate announced that Kate was pregnant, they wiped everything off their website and popped up a bunch of baby shower and children's parties things.
Yeah. Which is crazy because that pregnancy was announced earlier than Will and Kate would have wanted it to, because that was when she had to stay in hospital.
Yes, and people criticize that too, because they're like, that's a lot of pressure to put someone on, because she's still not in like when it's like kind of usually you would tell people because you can be more sure that nothing will happen. So it's funny 13 years later and how we're just
rewriting history.
That up. We are rewriting history. And there's been just so much going on with this. And one of the really big things that I've noticed that have stuck out is talking about, well, if there's a mixed race couple, family members are going to be excited. They might ask questions out of curiosity what this color is. That is the defense. And it's completely ignoring what Harry and Meghan, and Harry has said even more than Meghan has said about what has happened. They made it very clear that people were showing concerns. And I do understand there is confusion, because I guess this is an example of why you don't let white men speak for you. But during Harry's press tour,
can we put that on a mug? Don't let white men speak for you.
Please. Okay. He talks about this a bit, and he says, I did not. Sorry, I'm going to have to pull out my phone. I didn't put the full one.
No, that's okay.
Where is this? So I'm pretty sure this is an interview for CNN. He also talked to ITV Tom Brady, and he also Bradby, and he also had these
Tom
conversations.
Brady.
I know. I was like, no, you don't go here. But he says, but I think that you speak to the majority, maybe not all, but the majority of mixed race couples around the world, that the white side of the family would wonder whether talking openly about it amongst themselves, what their kids are going to look like, he said. The key word here was concern, as
Right.
opposed to curiosity, he said. But the way that the British press, what they turned it into, was not what it was.
And I want to give props to Prince Harry there and his team, who we talked in the past when he was doing his spare press tour about how he clearly got media training, and they did not give us any new information at that time about the conversations that were had. He could have, if it was over text, he could have shown us the texts. If it was like a conversation, he could have worded it in a way that gave us a little more insight into what exactly was said. But instead, what he referred back to was the interview itself, where that information first came out, and he just referred to the word concern as opposed to curiosity. So I think that's yet more evidence that the Sussexes do not want this to be a topic of conversation that haunts them forever. They said what they said, and like they are comfortable leaving it there.
And when that was said, I always think Meghan was probably at her pink anger. The way she was just looking at Oprah, looking the camera in the eye, and the way she was talking, you can tell fury was the main emotion.
Yeah.
And maybe she let it slip and they couldn't take it back because they knew that wasn't going to get cut out.
Yeah.
But I also understand, because I mean, I've had a lot of conversations with my Black friends about this, and some agree and some don't agree. Actually, M. Markles from IG, MMRKLES, is a wonderful follow. And she's, if you want to see a different point of view on this, because I understand why they didn't name them. She thinks they should have named them, and she has a great point of view on why. But personally, I see why. Because like we've said, it's worse to be called a racist than be a racist. I think they knew very well if they named them, and especially if the names are accurate, Charles and Kate, calling a white woman racist like that is the scariest thing in the world you can do. Yeah. It is genuinely terrifying. Okay. And I can't imagine, like, that's terrifying among your peers. I can't imagine when it's the whole world. Okay. The whole world is going to come at you. It's also why I think Meghan went out of her way to say she was a nice person after she corrected the Kate Cry story, which just started the avalanche of racism against her. Is she knew that so easily this could be turned against her, being mean and bad to poor little victim Kate, and you have to be very careful about that. So I just understand why they did it, because it would have been an absolute shit show and it would have haunted them forever unless they had literal text messages, because a lot of times you don't have that type of evidence for the racism you're experiencing in the workplace because you're not always recording your conversations. So personally, I get it. Although at the same time, it does cause a lot of gray area in this, because it's like, was Kate and Charles the only one who expressed concern, or were they the only one who were so explicit and being like, so like, what is it going to look like? What's the skin color going to be? Like, were they the one who voiced it? But the four other people in the room, which may have included other royals, were also thinking it and hinting. Right. So there is a lot of gray area here that I do think can be an issue. But what we do know, and like you said, with Harry and his really good media trading, like, he only referred to the Oprah interview, and he made it very clear it was out of concern. It was not out of curiosity. And that's why they were upset. Along with it happening in tandem with conversations about if Archie would get security and if he would even get the prince title, which he was legally owed, which we all saw when Charles became freaking king. He was legally owed that. Because I remember people trying to argue with me and you about that. You go like, oh, it's clear as day, you guys. Like, you just can't get around that.
Right.
So that is what people are confused about, because in that too, Harry didn't call it racism. He called it unconscious bias. But unfortunately, what this white man did not realize is what he was explaining was literal racism. Because he was saying, he's like, I think it becomes racism when people aren't willing to
do the work.
And it's like, your family hasn't done the work.
Yeah.
Like,
right. And this is the thing that I have to say all the time when people are arguing with me and like, well, Harry didn't call it racist. Why are you calling it racist? Because unconscious bias is a symptom of racism. And it cannot exist where racism has already not been like so well integrated into the culture that it becomes unconscious. Like, that's the through line there. And I do think that's where Harry's media training failed him a little bit. Because I get walking it back to unconscious bias. And again, this is a conversation we've already had. I get walking it back if you're trying to just get more white people to listen to you and like
Yes,
not
that's
get turned
true.
off by the word racist.
Yep, and that's a big one.
But for the overall conversation, it just made it a little bit harder to like truly recognize the stakes here and why this is so important to talk about.
Exactly. It did hurt him in the end, and it did hurt Megan in the end, which I found very frustrating about it all. But again, there's so much that has to go into this, and going against an institution as powerful as the monarchy, even if they are losing steam, they're still very, very very powerful. It's a scary thing to call something like that racist, let alone the great white way that is Kate Middleton. So it's understandable. So if you were confused about that, just letting people know, Meghan and Harry made it clear it was out of concern. And that is also why she wrote Charles that letter that I think he leaked, because Meghan did go on record when that came out to say, this did not come from me. I'm living in California. I'm chilling. Right. I don't want to think about this, and I don't want to hash this out publicly anymore.
Right.
So there we go. Yeah. And I mean, to really like kind of, I don't know, my final thoughts on Kate is, who knew she was such a replicate of the Queen Mother? Who knew she was going to carry on the racism to the quiet racist white woman? But let's see if history will erase it like it did for the Queen Mother, because people are still so shook when I call her racist, and I'm like, you guys, that was her personality. Okay.
Yeah, and with Kate, it's all the more insidious because at this point, she's dressing like the Queen Mother, but we're praising her. To go back to our Bananas article, we're praising Kate for quote unquote never putting a foot wrong and standing firm in her, not only her personal values, but her support of the royal family. When Meghan coming in and criticizing racism and transphobia and all of these things, that's supposed to be the issue. That's supposed to be what caused problems, not everyone else accepting them. So like, we're edging up against saying it out loud, right? That Kate has these old world values in the same way that the Queen Mother did. You know, when you talk about the Queen Mother, a lot of times people will just say, well, it was a different time. You know, we weren't concerned with all this woke shit. And that's not me saying that. That's, you know, the defense. But like, we're so close to just saying that about Kate, where, well, her social circle is, you know, not concerned with this woke shit, and she thinks it's ridiculous and above it. She's above it all. But like, it's a different time for 2023. You know what I mean? It's a different world in her social circles.
And there's a reason
to saying that.
This last engagement, we saw, you know, her greeting a little dark-skinned black boy. He's the one who gave her the flowers. It's why the CEO was not only her tour guide for the event, but why we saw her in the photos. Because you can literally look at photos of Kate going there, I think in 2018, and then she had like I think it was a visit there that was for the National Portrait Museum or something in 2020. And when you look at the photos, you don't see the CEO in most of them, just in the entrance. Even though the CEO is bigger in each stop, she's cut out of the photos, so it's just her with the kids. But in the photos for this last visit, the black CEO is in every single photograph. Yeah. And the photo released of her with only nurses of color. Only nurses.
Correct. I think I don't think that, I forget her name. The CEO of the Evelina Hospital surgery unit.
She just got the role, I think, in May. Congrats to her.
Yeah. But I think including her in the pictures, you know, of course she's going to be there. Of course she's going to be posing for pictures with Kate, but it's the releasing of them and even the staged photographs in general, which is something that Charles monarchy is really heavily leaning into. They take these group pictures now at every royal event where we didn't used to get that. And it's fascinating on like a PR level, but I think that's what's going on here is we're taking advantage of these moments to outwardly document who the royals are surrounding themselves with, which hasn't happened in the past.
I think too, let's make it seem a little less like secretive. You know what I mean? Like like, there's this stuff, you guys are too secretive. So, hey, I'll let them more into our visits. I'll let them more into the state banquets. Or that was the diplomatic dinners. That was last night, you guys. And not only did we get a group photo, that's the first one since 2016. And I think during Queen Elizabeth II's reign, there was maybe like 3 official photos for those diplomatic dinners. And we got like a bunch of HD or HQ photos, mostly of Kate, of course, which I don't blame them. She's a star power. But like, yeah, they're letting us in, and there's a reason for that.
And it started before the Queen's funeral. Remember, they took that photo of Camilla, Charles, William, and Kate, and they're grinning ear to ear. They're smiling for Chris Jackson, I believe it was, from Getty.
Oh, yeah, and he got the one last night too.
And it's like the United Front messaging, and it's so funny to me. Sometimes they're not even good pictures. I'm thinking about, it's snowing out my window. That's nice. I'm thinking about when, I'm trying to remember. Oh, it was Charles' quote unquote second coronation in Scotland. They took a picture of the 4 of them, and everyone else is in their robes, and Kate's in her bright blue coat dress, but like they're in the doorway. The lighting is terrible. They're facing the wrong direction. So, but it's become such a, I'm sorry, this is such a tangent. It's become such a priority to take these United Front photos, these group pictures. They look like a family at Thanksgiving, you know, standing there all in a row, looking kind of awkward, but
letting you guys in more. And like you said, United Front, you know, we have all this, like, we're this dysfunctional family. We're at each other's throats.
Yeah.
You guys keep hugging each other and smiling, except it's just stand together with your like hands clasped in front. No one touch, just smile.
And I wonder if that's a Charles thing, or if it's like Kate's team, like Will and Kate's team, suddenly having a seat at the table to be able to talk about these things, because it is interesting that it happens on Will and Kate's visits now as well.
Yes, always happens on their visits too, because people, their fans love that. Their fans do love that. So it is smart in that case. Very smart. Yeah. And I mean, it's funny, they'll do these photos together, but it's like William wouldn't invite his dad to like even be there for the first London Earth shot, or you know, Charles doing something with the Big 5 for his coronation is for his birthday, but somehow William isn't there, even though yesterday he did something with the Big 5 issue. Like, it's genuinely, you could really see how like the dysfunction is happening with how they do not even just once every other month come together when their interests are crossing. And there's a lot of that actually, but you wouldn't know because it's very Clarence, Kensington Palace, and then national events will come together. And this one for the Patreon, guys, I got to give her Patreon a shout out, especially because it allows us to do so much of what we do with the editing and so on. But we're going to be covering William and Kate in their dating years with The Crown coming up. And in this, I've been shout out to Meredith because she's been letting me use her account for the British newspaper. And it is so much fun to do research on there. And I found this article from 2006. And I may read something other than this because it is all the reasons why you hate and love early 2000s journalism, especially when talking about females. But the part about Kate, I find very eerie to where we are today in 2023. All right, so it says, Kate stood out for how she blended in. This is talking about a wedding that she attended, and I will put up the photo of the wedding they're talking about. Blended in. Her buttermilk knee-length brocade coat, the feathers in her hair, and the conservative kitten heels were chic and sophisticated, older than her years, and beyond reproach. There was nothing fun. There was nothing fun about her outfit, nothing that made her stunning, but she looked right. Comparisons with Diana suggest that Kate Middleton should wish to model herself on her boyfriend's late mother. William's late mother, however, might have looked good, but she was also, for the most part, deeply unhappy. Middleton, perhaps, has found the middle ground, and while it might never be an arrestingly attractive place, it might well prove happy. And well, I wonder if she's happy.
I wonder.
It's just like a little chills there. And then this one cracks me up. So it says, I'm kind of being mean for even reading this out loud. And this is because Zara and her husband are unconscious bias people, quotation marks. It says Zara remains a Windsor, and that no matter how promising the adolescent seems, those teeth have a way of asserting themselves in the 20s.
No, they didn't.
They wrote that down. They actually wrote that down. And then this might be my favorite, and I feel like we're allowed to laugh at this. It says, the young Windsors grew up aware that they were aesthetic role models other than their immediate why the long face family.
Oh my God.
So just to say that episode is going to be very interesting and a lot of fun, because just those few articles I've been through, and I'm like, wow, okay. Yeah, we're back in 2007, guys.
Just disgusting all around. I can't think of any royal coverage from the 2000s that was good. You know what I mean?
And when you see the run up to when they're going to get engaged is immediately when you begin to see the run up of using Kate against everybody else. Kate is what we need, because she's not these frivolous Paris Hiltons with their panties out, totally just stepping across the fact that the paparazzi were also trying to put their camera up her skirt. But anyways, it's really interesting seeing how the narrative and how quickly it changes, and how they dip in and out of the classism, but then loving her because she's not an aristocrat, but then showing her classism in other articles.
Right.
It's going to be a doozy, guys, if you want to join us.
I'm just thinking about all of Kate's wedding guest outfits now, because I can't think of a single one of those that was age appropriate for her. They're correct in that assessment.
And exactly, like knowing how to stand out, but while blending in. And that is something Kate is great at, until, Charles came on the throne and she was like, actually, I can stand out because no one likes you.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, what a time to be alive.
What a time. It was a lot, I will say that. It was a lot. But another big one coming out of this is titles.
Yeah, we're back. We're
back to 4.0. Strip them of their titles.
Strip.
Okay?
So this is returning to the Endgame conversation, and I hate this topic because it's just I hate getting into it. It brings out the worst in people. But there have been renewed calls to, quote unquote, strip Harry and Meghan of their titles, which I forget who it was. It might have been the Duchess. Hang on, let me find who it was so I can give them a shout out. Somebody pointed out in my post about this that the language we use to talk about depriving Harry and Meghan, it was Meghan Cath. On
amazing follow
Instagram.
on IG.
Amazing follow. It's mostly fashion, but she does both Kate and Meghan, which love.
And it's great. Yeah.
I'm just gonna read her comment, which is great. She said, "This conversation has so many layers of problematic, but one thing that has always bothered me is the use of the word stripped by those who think that the Sussex titles should be taken away. It has a real connotation of violence towards them, particularly Meghan, which is definitely a conscious choice." And I agree 100% with that.
Yes. Especially after what's his name in the stripper and walk her through the halls so they can whatever. It's just it's violent.
It's disgusting. But this is a renewed topic of conversation in the wake of Endgame, which once again, I want to point out that Harry and Meghan have done nothing. They did not contribute to this book. They have not put out any statements, not even saying that they declined to comment. That does not stop royalists from blaming them. It does not stop, in this case, a member of parliament from blaming them and thinking that they're the issue that needs to be tended to here. So this new effort to remove Harry and Meghan's titles comes from a conservative member of parliament, Bob Seeley, who is from the Isle of Wight. He wrote in a column this past week, quote, "The Duke and Duchess can be Mr. and Mrs. like the rest of us." And he promised to introduce a bill, he said, in the next couple of weeks that would follow through and seek to give Parliament an avenue to remove their titles. So as a refresher, when we talk about royal titles, which can and cannot be removed, Prince Harry was born a prince, so that can never be taken away from him. What we're talking about is his Duke title specifically, but he's also a baron. He's also, I think, a lord. Wait, let me find it. When he got married, the
titles.
Yeah, the Queen gave him the Dukedom of Sussex, the Earldom of Dumbarton, which is in Scotland, and the Barony of Kilkeel in Ireland. So those are his three titles. So those are what are called peerage titles. The peerage titles, they're not really something that you can just renounce. There have been calls for Harry and Meghan to renounce their titles and stop using them. But that's not how it works. So titles are a legal designation that requires literal legislation to give out. And it also requires legislation to take them away. The peerage, it's not just titles that are given to royals. It's all of British nobility. So think you can think of the ranks, right? Dukes, marquises, earls, viscounts, and barons. I think those are the 5 ranks currently.
Okay.
So those are the titles that can be passed down through a family, like your father to son, or they're granted by the monarch. And in the royal family, they get granted to princes when they get married. That's the tradition. So like when Prince Andrew got married, he became Duke of York, Edward becoming Earl of Wessex because the dukedom of Edinburgh was allegedly being saved for him. So that's the title we're talking about here. And Bob Seeley, this conservative MP, he calls removing their titles the nuclear option that the palace should the Privy Council, specifically the counselors that Charles has, who are political figures, and Parliament. He says that they should consider the nuclear option here, because if someone doesn't want to be a royal, that's a decision we respect, but they should not keep the titles and privileges if they trash an institution that plays an important part in our nation's life.
Gosh, it's such a dangerous commentary and sentiment to keep pushing. If you openly talk about racism, this is what's going to happen to you. We're going to take it from you. You're going to be punished. I mean, they're not going to be invited to the Duke of Westminster's wedding.
No, I'm not even touching that garbage story.
I'll say that for a TikTok. Okay. And then now it's like, we're going to take their titles. Like, it's sending just such an and gross message.
Even more dangerous, he goes on in his column. He says, sources close to the Sussexes have stressed that Harry and Meghan are not behind claims in Omid Scobie's book, but I suspect that few people believe such denials. Just openly accepting and perpetuating straight up conspiracy theories and lies. Saying, I don't believe them. They are lying, basically. This is another kind of dog whistle here. So he's appealing to this royalist base, and specifically the capital R royalist who really hate Meghan and Harry. So that idea that they're trashing the monarchy when all they're really doing, or all they have done in the past, they're not doing anything right now, but all they've done is sought a resolution to this treatment that they've endured. So setting all of that aside, the deluded reasons for wanting their titles to be removed, there are so many reasons why that is not going to work, and we can get into that.
Please, because I'm personally thinking, like, won't this open the Andrew box?
Yes, absolutely. So Prince Andrew is like the first thing that comes to mind, because Prince Andrew, we would be setting a precedent, right, if we do allow these titles to be removed.
Exactly.
So calls for Prince Andrew, who, again, he became Duke of York when he got married, to lose his own peerage titles. Remember, he wouldn't lose his prince title. It would just be his dukedom. Those have been growing since the Queen stripped him of his honorary military titles and his patronages in January 2022, after a U.S. judge ruled that a civil lawsuit over his sex abuse scandal could proceed to trial. So in the wake of that, Andrew already lost his honorary military titles. The same thing that happened to Harry when he stepped back from being a working royal, which we have thoughts on the punishment being the same here, for 2 very different alleged quote unquote crimes. But so the pressure to remove his military titles, though, in the case of Andrew, came from a letter signed by over 150 veterans in the UK, urging the Queen to remove those. Yeah, that was huge.
That was huge.
And the city of York is the one kind of pushing that he lose his dukedom there. It's actually a city council member in York that has launched a campaign to take Andrew's peerage title away. Now, now punishing Harry and taking his peerage title away, it would set this dangerous precedent, I think, for Andrew.
Mm-hmm. It would have to. There's people who genuinely want Andrew's gone for good reason. Maybe it was like the Patreon thing. Patreons were dropping him, and then she finally had to jump on board. Just couldn't ignore it anymore.
Right.
People were like, I don't want to be affiliated with him. He's not being affiliated with my charity for good reason. Like, he just paid off someone who claims that he did horrible things to her. No.
Yeah. And I want to bring in one more example before I tell you this MP's plan for removing the title, because he does have a plan. But before we get to that, I do want to also note the comparison to Edward VIII, which is also kind of getting discussed here, because he, gave up the crown. He abdicated the throne. After he abdicated and left the United Kingdom, he got a title. They gave him the Duke of Windsor title after his abdication. So
I forgot about that.
He was given that title so that he could enjoy, his same level of status into his later years. Despite the fact
he was a Nazi.
Right. I was going to say
sympathizer.
Despite the fact that he went on to take pictures with Hitler and like very much admired the Nazi regime.
He did a whole sponsored trip to Germany to meet the Hitler party and the Nazi party, like influencer, but make it a Nazi. Like,
and even though he also had this quote unquote unsuitable marriage and was bringing all this shame onto the royal family recognized that these titles have nothing to do with that. The conversation around who gets a title has nothing to do with deserving it or earning it. That is the whole point of the monarchy. I'm an American,
that's
right?
The slope, yeah.
And the fact that I have to remind people that a monarchy is not a meritocracy. There's nothing you can do to quote unquote earn one of these titles anymore. No. They used to be given out to people who like won military battles and things like that, but that's not how they work anymore.
Nope.
They are purely a status symbol, purely used to hold up this archaic social system. The idea of removing them because someone doesn't quote unquote deserve them, it's a thread that the monarchy cannot right. They cannot afford to pull on that thread. They just can't.
Like, because what are we measuring deserve by now? Like, you're getting in so many prickly questions there that they know in a modern society, people are going to be like, it's nothing you guys have done. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the idea that, you can boil that idea down because it's if Harry and Meghan, okay, they're not trashing the institution, but they're also not, I don't know, what else could you say? They're not pulling their weight. They're not representing the monarchy anymore.
Yes.
That is another thing that people say. They don't work for their titles, so they shouldn't have them. That's also not how the system works. There are so many people who do not work for the royal family that have titles.
Like there's cousins, nephews, nieces, like
people who aren't related at all. Yeah. Exactly. So here's the mechanism by which this MP wants to remove Harry and Meghan's titles. Because remember, removing a peerage title can only be done by, I have the quote here, by statute passed by both the House of Commons and the House of Lords and receiving royal assent, which means that the monarch has to then agree to it. So the Bob Seely's plan to strip, quote unquote, Harry and Meghan's titles would be based on, are you ready? A law from World War I called the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917.
I know this one. Yes. Okay. Tell me.
Yeah. So this is a Wartime Powers Act, which was meant to target German princes, mostly German princes, who possessed British royal titles. So around the same time that King George V is changing the family's name from Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to Windsor, he's also looking over at some of his relatives in Germany. And this stems from Queen Victoria and the Kingdom of Hanover not being able to pass to her. Instead, it passed to one of her uncles. So there are two lines now of like British royals. One branch has the German titles. One is just the British.
And like Albert too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were all related.
Yes, literally a lot of German blood and ties in there.
So people who were specifically targeted by this act there were only about like 7, I think, people affected by it. But one of them was Charles Edward, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and Ernest Augustus, who was formerly the Crown Prince of Hanover. They were also British princes and dukes, even though they were officers in the German army.
Yes. And fun fact about Charles, he became a Nazi.
Yeah,
that's why I know about this. He became a Nazi.
It's all and he coming was full circle.
Friends with Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Yep, he used to visit her in her garden while he was a Nazi for Hitler. Yep. Yes.
So you can see why George V may have looked at this and been like, okay, yeah, that's not great.
Yes.
The effort to remove their titles began in 1914 with a parliamentary figure who was actually an Irish nationalist, which I find interesting. But the original act, let me find this here. So the people in question, the British, the Dukes of Albany and Cumberland, who had these German titles, they were condemned as traitors in 1914. And at that point, members of parliament started to demand that steps be taken to, quote, secure that they shall no longer retain UK peerages. The law didn't get passed until 3 years later, in 1917. And it's said that George V was reluctant to make removing their titles into a political spectacle. He did
not want to.
No, he did take them out of the Order of the Garter in 1915.
That was the first strike. Yep.
Yep.
Right when the war, I think, began. Yeah. To really try to be like, there's anti-Germany sentiment. We're getting in trouble because our German family members keep coming into Buckingham Palace while we're literally fighting a war with them. Let me take away something from them. So Order of Garter, here we go.
And it said it took a while to get him to like come on board with the idea of the actual act of parliament. Because remember, the British monarch has to give royal assent to anything that passes through parliament. So, you know, this is kind of a rubber stamping mechanism today. It's very rare that the monarch is going to refuse royal assent on a bill or a law. But more often you're trying to resolve that before it even becomes an issue, right? You're trying to make sure that things you're passing through parliament have no question of being approved, right? So that it never becomes like a sticky situation for the monarch to find themselves in. Like the last time... Right. The last time it may have become an issue was during Brexit. There were rumors that the Queen was considering, you know, not giving royal assent to certain things passing through Parliament, but it never came to that. So that's the context here.
Lizzie knows better.
She does. So Bob Seeley, he would, in order to make this work in 2023, he's looking to amend the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917 and remove references to a, quote, present war, because there is no war happening. This is just two people you don't like.
There's no alliance to be drawn right now.
Isn't that crazy? Like we're likening Harry and Meghan to a literal foreign power that you're fighting a war against.
Exactly. Someone who gave their alliance to Germany in that, and then went on to give their alliance to Hitler. Like that is what you're trying to compare them to. And those people got more love and acceptance from the family than you're seeing Meghan and Harry get. And they were literal fucking Nazis. Like Charles Edward was scum. And the funny thing is, a lot of this led him into the arms of Hitler, because of course a white man who sees times changing and has had these titles stripped from him was sad and angry at the world. So he met someone who was an extremist and was like, yeah, like this sounds great. Let's just, you know, hurt Jewish people and anyone who's non-Aryan. And he jumped on board, and the royal family literally opened him back with open arms after World War I, and when they were trying to pacify Hitler. So it just really brings up a very ugly history. I almost hope that this conversation gets started again so people can once again see what Meghan and Harry are being compared to, which is just absolutely asinine, and once again shows why why they didn't name them, why it's so scary to say these things. This is what happens. You get relentlessly punished. And while I'm not crying over anyone losing their title, I really don't give a damn. I do care, though, that this in their eyes is like the punishment of all punishment. And the fact that they would get it because they called out the racism and the mistreatment is setting a very, very bad message. Like, 2020 meant nothing. The Black Lives Matter rise meant nothing. George Floyd dying meant being murdered meant nothing. If this is still what it comes to if someone exposes racism.
You know? You're making too much sense here, Alex. They're never going to listen to this.
They're just going to go in my inbox and yell at me, okay? And be like, how dare you say that? He wore a Nazi uniform. What are you talking about?
He's the real Anyway.
I will always say it's funny that the Nazi uniform didn't become an issue until he got with the black woman. Because I'm like, y'all loved Harry despite that Nazi uniform until he got with the black woman. And now it's like, oh, that's bad, isn't that? That's not just like poor Harry. So it's been a fun week.
So just to wrap up with the titles too, there's some interesting reporting about this. Most of the conservative royalist media is kind of like joking about Harry and Meghan's titles maybe being taken away. They're writing these sensational headlines like Harry and Meghan could lose their titles this week or something like that. Which again, not how this is going to work. But the Daily Mail, who they love King Charles over there at the Daily Mail, they were one of the places where I saw some pushback to this, where palace sources briefed the Daily Mail that Charles will never agree to this plan. He will never strip Harry and Meghan of their titles, despite the, quote, continuing heartache that they're causing. Royal sources are saying that this is something he refuses to even contemplate. One insider who knows the king well says he is not a punitive man and would never want to humiliate his son and daughter-in-law in that way. But removing the titles is just not, they're stressing. It's not something that Charles will ever give royal assent to. So that'll be interesting. If it ever escalates to that point where it's a law that gets to his desk in his red box, I think he's going to say no.
Yeah, and it's his own fault too. Like, he's smart on this because, again, this is going to set a precedent that's going to be bad because Andrew will be next. And Lord knows Andrew knows where the bodies are buried, and he will talk if anyone dares to take anything from him. And then again, conversation about who deserves a royal title. What is deserving mean? Like, there's so many conversations that would come from this that the royal family would not want to deal with. And again, I know it would break Harry's heart, and I could see angry Harry coming out again where he's doing nuclear option after nuclear. Like, he's going to start naming names. Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, people will get names if this happens. Like, I could see him going off.
Yeah. And I mean, especially since like Harry and Meghan in the documentary, people forget this. They mention they offered to give up their titles, and it was not something that was thought necessary. And it's something that it sounds like the Queen and Charles said, no, we're not going to do that. Like,
the Queen would never want that. She would never. She is such a traditionalist. And it's not even, we would agree on the reasons why they shouldn't get taken from him, but she would find it ridiculous that a boy who was born with royal blood does not have his dukedom that she gave him, of all things. Like, she takes that very seriously. She is all up in classism's ass. Okay. Like, these titles mean everything to her, and people forget too. Harry, during his book tour for Spare, said he's a monarchist. Another disappointing statement that he said, but it's just a fact. Like, he's a monarchist. He believes in these titles, and he still believes that the royal family can do good. This was said in Oprah 2 by Meghan and Harry, by Meghan too. They're more of a, if they can fix the system, they can do great things, rather than there's no point in this, which is say like where I am. Okay?
Yeah, which is, they're not attacking the institution. People refuse to listen to their words. They are attacking the media, who causes problems for the institution. And I think they're attacking it in some way, the men in gray, the firm, the bureaucracy that has arisen. Within it.
Which is why I think the British press gets a little pissed and this happened after the interview when they were like, your family's the one who told us all this stuff. I mean, the Daily Mail, or maybe not the Daily Mail, I forget if it's the Mirror or the Sun that he's going up with the case right now, but they have said more than once, we didn't hack you. We got this information from your family, which I think is partially true. I don't think it's totally true, but it's like, your family gives us this information, so you're not going to blame us all for this. They are a part of this. And I think that's where they get frustrated with Harry, but I really don't care about that, because who cares about them, honestly? But it's like, it's a slippery slope for everyone all around. And I do genuinely believe that Charles misses Harry. Like, unfortunately, there was favorites, and it's pretty obvious that Harry was Charles' favorite son. And I think he misses his buddy. I think he misses writing long letters to him and having that type of relationship. And it does make me a little sad for them, even if Charles is a horrible father.
Yeah, it's tough, because another part of Endgame talks about Charles' pride and how he'll never be the one to make the first move. But like, the ball truly is in his court. Harry, I think, feels like he's set his piece. He's taken the steps that he needs to take in order to open himself up for reconciliation. But at some point, you gotta meet in the middle.
Exactly. Like, I can only do so much, especially when you guys royally screwed me over.
Right.
Like, I mean, there's a whole case we can't get into going on right now with the security. And it's another example of, wow, they like really screwed them over. They really, really messed with their safety, all to say, fuck you for leaving, which is quite scary to think about, because the many death threats that they get.
Yeah, just all these tactics that they tried out that ended up backfiring spectacularly.
Like, karma really just, like, it came in hot, and it's sad that they'll never fully...
They don't understand.
Of the punishment that they deserve for doing what they did. Or fully understanding. It's so obvious through all of this briefing that they don't understand why this is a big deal. They do not. And I think one, too, back to Kate is something that people need to, we all like, it's hard for me sometimes to just be like, damn, this is where we are. It's that Kate's demographic, the one that she wants to talk to and the one that I think she connects to the most is the type of demographic where even if they don't like Trump and voted for him in particular, they would never, ever dare speak out against him at a party with other men around.
Right.
They're trad wives. They stay quiet. They don't speak. They don't give a loud opinion. And if they do, maybe it's one-on-one with her husband when he allows it. That's the type of woman she speaks to. And that's why she didn't get along with Meghan. Okay. And she asked to borrow her lip gloss. So, points.
Oh my goodness.
We hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Check out our TikTok, Lady Audaci-Tea, and definitely check out Amanda's TikTok, matter of fact, where she has been covering all of this, including the Sophia dress moment that was really weird, including the diplomatic reception where Kate wore an exact identical look to her Jordanian royal wedding.
Crazy.
Always funny when she does that. like it's like she's like, you guys, what are you talking about? This isn't new. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not here. This is the Jordanian royal wedding. It's
wild.
It's been
with a closet as deep as hers is. Why are we pulling things from 6 months ago when we have 10 years? I know Kate still fits into the old clothes. I know she does.
Okay, please, give us the dresses that we never got HQ photos of,
right?
Because Queen Elizabeth was stubborn and would not let us inside of those receptions. Okay, why not wear one of those?
Unless we're not supposed to be unless pictures of Kate are not supposed to be getting as much real estate. And it's almost what Princess Diana did with her gym outfits, right? Where she would wear the same thing.
That's very true.
So that you couldn't post multiple pictures of her over and over again because it all looked the same. So
exactly.
More credence to the theory that Kate is supposed to not be shining as bright these years.
Yes. That there's sometimes I think in the big moments, Charles is like, yeah, you do need to step back. Yeah, you do.
Anyway.
And also Camilla wore that really ugly brooch that the Queen Mother owned on her jacket. And I think it's Miss Rosie Hart is her IG name. She's awesome. She pointed out those brooches can be something. And if you see them on Queen Mary on her gown, they're beautiful. They don't work for a modern dress, or they don't work for the type of dresses that Camilla wears. Yeah. So it's get Kate in a corset and give it to her, if anything, because that's what you need for that type of brooch to wear.
Give us a Vivienne Westwood dress.
Exactly. Yeah. Perfection. It would be perfection. But I'll throw up these pictures, you guys. It literally just looks like someone just threw some sparkle on the front. I want to say diamond.
It looks like a Christmas ornament. It almost looks like a Christmas ornament that she just took the hook and put it in her dress. I'm like, what are we doing? It's so also missing another tangent. It's missing a tassel. If you zoom in, there's these tassels hanging off of each side, and it's missing one on the left side.
She's a little too excited to have all hands on deck in the vault. And I get it, but also ma'am, settle down. Settle down.
So all of these things we get into on our TikToks and our Instagram stories. Yes. It is a good time.
It's a really good time. Thank you guys for joining us, and pinkies up.